What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with some Destiny 2 news, updates, and previews for content we're getting this week in the game. So, first things first, Bungie have said, with an update to Renegades, that they will not be refreshing power, so that plan has actually changed. There are a couple of other things related to that, like unstable cores, which will no longer be taken away. That's a relatively impactful piece of news, so we'll cover it. Then, we'll also round up some of the changes that we're seeing with the patch this week. I probably won't be covering patch notes at reset, since we've got the exotic mission and stuff. So we'll round up a couple of things ahead of time there, as well as content where we get the Armsweek event, of course, and the new exotic mission for the Axe. So a few things going on this week. If you guys find the video helpful, do us a massive favor, hit subscribe. That way I can keep you up to date with everything related to the game, but otherwise, let's get into it. First things first. It doesn't relate to content this week, but Bungie have said as we continue to develop power and progression changes for Renegades, we'd like to announce the following adjustments. So, seasonal power will now carry over into Season 28 in December, and there will not be a seasonal power reset as in past seasons. So, basically, the power we have right now, we will just keep, and we'll continue progressing from there. They also add that unstable cores will carry over into Season 28. There's been a lot of conversation about cores in general. Infusion costs are very high, especially if there's a large gap between the power level of pieces of gear you want to infuse. But additionally, Bungie were planning to actually refresh them, or basically set them back to 0 at the start of a new season, which is no longer going to be a thing. So those two are relatively big changes in terms of progression. Otherwise, they've also said beginning next week, a catch-up will be available to boost players to 300 power, and they'll provide additional info on these changes and more in the TWID on Thursday. We should also keep in mind there are additional power changes coming next week. And I'm sure, obviously, as we go into Renegades and the season that kicks off in December, this will have an impact on sort of how we acquire pieces of gear, the tiers that we earn and stuff. If you're at the appropriate power level to earn tiered gear, presumably, we'll be able to jump in and immediately start doing that with Renegades. And yes, there will be other adjustments that Bungie will have to make given that this system is being changed. But overall, I think it's going to be a positive, and you'll have to give me your thoughts in the comment section. As we look a bit more to this week though, firstly, we get the exotic mission. So this is the Heliostat exotic mission in the Plaguelands. That will earn us the new axe. Wolfsbane and Bungie provide a juicy screenshot of what the axe actually looks like right here. There's a cool animation with it by the looks of things too. Whereas it powers up, the blade kind of opens and becomes this giant, ridiculous cleaver. Either way, it should be pretty fun. We're not entirely sure how we'll actually be initiated into this exotic mission, whether it will just show up in the portal and be like, hey, go play it. We'll have to find out, but the initial run will be at normal difficulty with fixed modifiers, so everyone will have the same consistent experience when they first earn the weapon. And after we've done that first run, portal tiers and modifier customization options will be available in Pinnacle Ops, which we can configure to get continued power progression on future runs. So that means there are additional drops that we'll earn in the exotic mission. It's not just for the weapon. And I guess it will function a bit like exotic missions that have been added to Pinnacle Ops already, things like Kel's Fall. So very much looking forward to it, and let me know if you'll be diving in the comment section. The other new component this week, or at least event content, we should say, is Armsweek. So this time it focuses on shotguns. We'll be able to farm for the Trachinus shotgun, and there'll be some limited time exotic weapon mods that we can apply to shotguns, as you can see on screen, much like we saw in the first event. So I guess even if you're not massively interested in Armsweek, it's an additional layer on top. Then we get into some of the changes Bungie are making to ammo, sandbox, and abilities. So firstly, Bungie are upping the special ammo meter gains at no to low investment for primary ammo weapon final blows in the Crucible by 33%. So if you're not leaning into ammo generation in general, there should be more special ammo more often in general. Otherwise, they're also buffing the finite impactor, improving its range, handling, and reload speed to bring it more in line with weapons that we have in the modern sandbox, as the base stats for it were basically the same as when it originally dropped in the game. And they're making the adjustment to spread chart hand cannons, where they're increasing bonus damage versus enemies in PvE from 8% to 15%, which is basically designed to offset the fact that they're reducing range by 5% and increasing spread by 10% to make them less obnoxious in PvP. Otherwise, they're also reducing the damage of heavy burst sidearms, with body shot damage going from 33 to 31, and crit damage going from 52.8 to 49.6. So those are the weapon adjustments. I'm sure there'll be other notes in the patch as well, with more kind of minor content fixes, quality of life things, and there will be some ability changes too. So I'm going to run a section here from a recent video that breaks down the ability changes if you want to catch up with them again. Some new passive traits for classes, buffs for Void Warlocks, Void and Stasis changes for Titans, and a few additional ones for Hunters, which sound pretty decent. So if you want to check those out or catch up with them if you've missed them, we'll run it here. Otherwise, I appreciate you tuning in as always. Let us know what you're looking forward to this week. And otherwise, I hope you guys have an awesome day. Looking a bit more though on the ability side of things, Bungie have some adjustments to Warlocks. So firstly, they say there will be a new passive trait which grants a 10% bonus to passive grenade energy regeneration and a 5% additive bonus to grenade damage. Although that secondary one will have its benefit halved in PvP, which is understandable. Otherwise, they say the following Warlock constructs now count as grenades for stats and perks. So it includes Ionic Sentry, Helion, Bleak Watcher, Child of the Old Gods, and Arc Soul. Otherwise, for general tuning for Warlocks, on Void, Chaos Accelerant now grants 2 grenade charges, which is nice, and on the Scatter Grenade, the charged grenade now grants 4 more Seekers. They've also increased the charged Seeker damage versus combatants by 25%, and improved its tracking as well as its lifetime, so Scatter Grenades should be feeling pretty good next week, hopefully. Otherwise, on Axiom Bolt, the charged grenade now detonates twice. They've also increased the charged projectile damage by 25% again versus PvE enemies, but they also reduced the projectile speed when tracking enemy players by 40%, so should be far stronger in PvE and less obnoxious in PvP. Then for the Vortex Grenade, it now repeatedly pulls enemies into it when charged, with the pull against players reducing over time. On Spike Grenade, it now charges into handheld Supernova, plus the same can be done with Suppressors and Void Wall Grenades. Otherwise, for Stasis and Glacial Harvest, Stasis Shard creation no longer has a cooldown in PvE. So those are the Warlock changes. Of course, a lot of them focusing on Void. The passive trait sounds alright, and no doubt Bungie will have additional Warlock stuff in the near future. But for October 7th, Titan changes. On Stasis Howl of the Storm, it now grants 2 melee charges, which is good. They've also changed Stasis Crystal spawn pattern and added 4 more crystals, which now slow enemy players instead of freezing them. So again, following the theme of stronger in PvE and less obnoxious in PvP. Otherwise, on Cryoclasm, they've increased the fragment slots from 2 to 3 and reduced the long slide cooldown from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. Otherwise, on Tectonic Harvest, Stasis Shard creation no longer has a cooldown in PvE. So some generally good ones for Stasis there. Otherwise, on Void, for Unbreakable, safe to say Void Titan needs a bit of love. They're reducing the grenade energy drain speed when holding shield. They've also reduced the forward movement slowdown when the shield is hit by an attack, increased fragment slots from 2 to 3, and Blast now disorients enemies for a short time. On Bastion though, it no longer increases cooldown time in PvE, so less of a negative effect there. And again, outside of Stasis, a bit of a focus for Void Titans. But finally for Hunters, they also get a new passive trait like the Warlock, so it increases passive movement speed bonus, which is now equivalent to the old tier 10 mobility. That's good. Otherwise, they're increasing Hunter sprint speed at default from 8 meters per second to 8.6 meters per second. And Hunters will have a 10% bonus to weapon equip speed, so that will affect Hunters overall, but for Marksman's Dodge, it now picks up nearby ammo bricks on activation and reloads all weapons on activation. So that's a pretty good change, and when it comes to Strand Suspending Slam, no longer increases the cooldown duration after use, but suspending enemies with Suspending Slam now gives Woven Mail, and the duration scales with the number of enemies suspended. So the Woven Mail change could be pretty strong, and on Threaded Spectre, they've increased the fragment slots from 2 to 3. But finally for Solar, on your mark, they've rescaled the stack count to a maximum of 10 stacks. Precision hits will give 1 stack, Precision Final Blows give 2, and Final Blows at 10 stacks cure the player, although that is a trade-off against Radiant because Precision Final Blows will no longer grant it. Additionally, stacks of On Your Mark will now give weapon stats, so the maximum is 50 weapon stat at 10 stacks, but it still grants the previous reload benefit. Then on Deadshot Golden Gun, it refunds ammo on Golden Gun Final Blows instead of ignitions, and extends super duration on Final Blows, and energy diminishes with Final Blows as well, although the gains for that have been reduced in PvP. Finally though, also a stasis change for Grim Harvest, and Stasis Shard creation no longer has a cooldown in PvE, so funnily enough, Hunters doing relatively well out of this series of changes. And again, all of these will land on October 7th.